Sebestian Vettel, the man that got me into F1 and the man that's retiring this year. We need to make a video about all his years ranked and all his seasons that he's had. Now, I'm ranking every single season he's been in Formula One with the exception of 2007. It's only like 5 or 6 races and it doesn't really mean much that he did those 5 or 6, 7 races because the Toro Rosso was terrible at that time and it was just kind of getting him into his career. So I'm counting everything from 08 to 2022. Let's dive into it. Starting this rankings list, I have at 15 the 2020 Ferrari season with Vettel. Now, this is my least favorite season to watch, and I also think that it is his worst performed season. Mainly because of Ferrari. I really don't think he was not in the right mindset. He felt like he was getting screwed over completely with how the car was made, how the development completely fell back from how it was in 2019. So it's a completely different car that he's working with now, and Charles was beat him last year, so some part of his mind's a little bit boggled that happened too, that he's losing now because of that. So he was treated unfairly. The car didn't suit his driving style, that Seb style that we know typically. It didn't suit him, and the team really just terribly let him down. They told him he was leaving the team somewhere, not even in the halfway mark. So I don't know. I mean, look at what Binotto's doing to Charles Leclerc right now. So just gives you an example of what type of guy he is. At 14, we have the 2014 Red Bull year. This is the year that Daniel Ricciardo came into F1, and well, it wasn't the year that he came into F1, but it was the year that he came to Red Bull, and this is where he showed Ricciardo's not to be messed with. The car kind of developed in a weird way for Vettel. The new regulations definitely didn't suit the type of driving style that he did have with that 2013 to 10 Red Bull that he had, that he loved driving in whatever style that he wanted to. So he didn't really feel comfortable. He wanted to prove himself in the Ferrari. It kind of seemed like it. That is how I remember the 2014 year, and everything that I've watched from it so far. It's as if he knew he wanted to leave and he wanted to go onto a better car, quote unquote, but wanted to prove himself in that kind of Michael Schumacher type way. So that's why he went to Ferrari, because he idolized Michael Schumacher, and that to him was a big deal to make that move, and that is why the car wasn't really suited to him that year. It was unreliable, and yeah, just wasn't a great year for Vettel yet again. At 13, we have the 2009 Red Bull. Now, this might be a controversial one because he wasn't bad this year, and he almost won the championship, but I think it's because of that reason that I didn't want to put this high up the list. This was the year that Brown won the championship. He should have beaten Jenson Button to the championship, and he should have beaten Mark. He did beat Webber sometimes, but it's funny. I just listened recently to a podcast, and he talks about how in 2009 Webber had a couple of times where the setup was so out of his league that he couldn't compete with Webber because of how Webber was doing. Well, that probably explains why 2009 was so weird. There were so many opportunities that he threw away. His car was also unreliable in some of the spots, and he could have won this year. This could have been 5 championships for Vettel, but it was not. But I'm kind of glad Jenson Button got it. It was cool that it happened, but still. This could have been his winning year and his first winning year, but he kind of just threw it away. This is the real stinger. Honestly, this is one of my least favorite years that I've seen Vettel drive, because I was very motivated to watch him drive, and then something like this happens. At 12, we have the 2018 Ferrari. He lost the championship due to that horrible mistake that happened in Hockenheim. Oh, the dreadful hearing the crying that he had on his on the radio, and how he felt after that type of just subtle mistake that he made. But like I said, I just listened to the podcast he was talking about. He said that he broke earlier than he thought he had to. So that means that he had to even break even earlier than he was breaking before. So it was just unlucky. I mean, I really wish this was the year that he beat Lewis, but it still would have been it still would have been a mountain to climb to beat him this year, regardless of what. That Ferrari was fast. It was fast, but Lewis is Lewis, man. I mean, they're close up in skill. I would definitely say that, like, Lewis and Vettel could definitely compete if they're both put into the same car, but yeah, that pressure of being in Ferrari and that just, I don't know, it was just a screw up. And honestly, 09 and 2018 are pretty close, and the years that weren't too great for Vettel and were terrible to watch as a Vettel fan. 2019 Ferrari. Now, I mean, this isn't a horrible year for Vettel because he was still very competitive and he brought his A game when he had to. The car did not start off competitive. It was definitely not up there with the Mercedes, but as the year went on and as they made the engine illegal and gave it a couple of tweaks, if you know what I mean, the Ferrari was competitive. And when it was competitive, Leclerc was beating him. That was the problem that I had. He put in that killer lap in Spa, and then Leclerc puts in a 0.8 higher lap than Vettel. I mean, that was just insane. That was insane that Leclerc was beating him at that pace. And then in Monza, yet again, Leclerc gets a win. Vettel has a spin. So it sucks. It sucks to see that he couldn't use the car at the full potential at the time that he needed to. If I remember correctly, Canada was supposed to be his win in 2019. And I know that he didn't win that year because, in my eyes, he won. But they gave him a 5-second penalty for the whole Lewis Hamilton thing, which was BS. But yeah, 2019 really summed up. I mean, it had highs, but it had really low lows too. At number 10, I have 2021 Aston Martin. This is a weird one to rate because Vettel is finally in a car that's not competing with the top. He's been in a car competing at the top for over 10 years now. And him getting into this Aston Martin was like almost like a redemption arc, what felt like when he was in that 2020 Ferrari. And he improved, in my opinion, drastically in comparison to how it was in that 2020 Ferrari. But with that came complications because he started the year off terribly. And with no points in the first, was it 4 or 5 races? So I was a bit worried watching how he was going to be in this Aston Martin car as a Vettel fan. But he improved. He improved big time, and he had that insane performance in Baku. He had that insane performance in Monaco. He should have had that number 2 in Hungary. I mean, multiple times he performed how he needed to perform. And he had the most overtakes in that year. So the highs were high, lows were low. But overall, it was a very medium season, in my opinion, and that's why it's number 10 on the list. Everything from 10 and below are better seasons than what I just said before. I at least I think so. And number 9, we had the 2016 Ferrari. This year is also really hard to rate. The Ferrari was just kind of average. He did what he could do in that Ferrari. He also had some spins and some mistakes that shouldn't have been happening for, like, Sebestian Vettel. Remember, these are Vettel standards. I'm not putting him to the standard of somebody like that's a mediocre driver. This is Vettel that we're talking about, a top 5 legend of all time, in my opinion. So you have to compare the seasons and be fair. Be like, was 2016 a good year? It was an okay year. But the car also wasn't anywhere near those Mercedes because the championship battle was Nico Rosberg and Lewis Hamilton. And that's all you could really get, was just those two. Who could win between those two, right? Vettel really wasn't competitive there. The Red Bull really wasn't competitive there. So, I mean, say what you want, but it's a very middle season. Now, from 8 to 1, these are, in my opinion, Vettel's best drives. And at 8, I have 2010 Red Bull. Yes. It's crazy that it's at 8, right? But that's how many seasons this guy's had that he's been amazing. So, at 2010, that's what I have. He became the youngest world driver championship. He should have had way more points, but he was still amazing and he did exactly what he needed to do. He was close with his teammate. He should have been way further. He had a couple of silly mistakes, but I mean, he was young, and he was just making little errors that would probably happen to any driver if it wasn't even Vettel. So it was a good year. It was a good year, and he won his first World Drivers' Championship. So this was the start of the 4-year run that Vettel had. So you have to rate this highly. Now, you guys are probably surprised to see this, and if you are, then you really haven't been watching this season, because at 7, I have the 2022 Aston Martin. For a car that started at 9th at the beginning of the year, he has brought this car to different levels. I mean, this thing is a recycling bin with 4 wheels. Literally, till maybe around Zandvoort, that car wasn't even cracking the top 10 in qualifying. It was so hard to drive, and the constant complaint of that car was balance. They could not balance a car. That is so sad. He ended up having that amazing Baku performance. In Monaco, he was great considering the car was just made in Barcelona and they were still learning the car, really. So, Baku, great performance. Japan, great performance. Singapore, great performance. Koda should have been an even better performance. I mean, for him to even have 5 or 6 performances that are amazing performances in a car that should not even be anywhere near the pace of like a lot of other cars, I would say that they are comfortably 6th or 7th, but they can't fight the Alpine. The Alpine's too fast, and the McLaren is a little too fast for him as well on most tracks. Look at the Brazil performance he had. That should have been a P5, P6 minimum, but strategy screwed him over. And honestly, if we talk about strategy has screwed over Vettel so many times this year, but unluckily, it's not really been Aston Martin's fault. It's been more of like what's been happening with the safety cars and just bad timing in general. But all in all, big time season, and it's sad to see that he's retiring this season because there is so much left for him to do in this sport. It is so sad to see that this is the end. 2017 Ferrari. Seb did wonders this year, was competitive with Lewis. I think he could have had a chance to win this year, but at the same time, their car wasn't fast enough. He did what he could do. He really shined this year in his Ferrari, and he killed Kimi Räikkönen by 100 points. And I think that was the reason why I had to put this guy up as high as it was. He didn't win the championship, but you can't lie that this car wasn't as competitive as the Mercedes, but he almost made it look like it was. He had wins this year. He beat Bottas and Kimi in 2017. That's a big stride. It's a big stride in comparison to how that 2016 Ferrari was. 2017 was different, and he made it look even more different than it should have been. I debated having this even higher, but the 2018 Toro Rosso year for Sebestian Vettel, it's a roller coaster. You really have highs and lows, but the car is also terrible. Terrible. It wasn't awful, but it wasn't great. It definitely wasn't a good car, but what's funny is the first ever, so since Red Bull joined F1 and they had their their normal Red Bull team and the Toro Rosso team, which were both Red Bull teams, he ended up getting the first one in both the Red Bull and the Toro Rosso. But guess where he got it first? The Toro Rosso. In Monza, in an insane performance where he ended up getting first. I mean, because of that alone and getting a win with a car that should not be where it's at, you gotta put it at number 5. You really do. Because there was a lot more performances, a lot of P4s, P5s. He did great. You gotta give it to Vettel. This was awesome to watch. Number 4 on the list, I have Red Bull 2012. Now, this is an insane year and my favorite year of watching Vettel. Is it his best? No. Is it close to his best? Very. 4-1, extremely close years. These are all of his years that I think were the best and the most that he could do with the car. He drove the brakes off the car. I mean, I can't explain it, but 2012, the car wasn't reliable, and that put him in a silly situation. He had a little bit of mistakes, so that also put him in a silly situation. But Abu Dhabi and Brazil, that's all I gotta say. Go ahead and watch those. 2012 Abu Dhabi, starting from the pit lane, getting the P3. Brazil, spinning on the first lap, coming back to P5 to end up getting his 3rd world championship. I mean, they're performances that will be looked back 30 years from now, and people will be like, how did he do it? How did this guy make this comeback? How was he that good in that time? It's funny how underrated he was at that time and how much they overrated the car that he had. But look at Mark Webber. Compare him to Mark Webber, and how many years did Mark Webber beat Sebastian Vettel in those prime of 4 years that he ended up winning? 0. He beat him 0 years. So, you can say what you want, but Vettel's the guy, and what he did with that car was magical, as well as the car being great too. 2011 Red Bull. Yes, another unstoppable year for Vettel himself. This year was unstoppable. He won 11 out of the 17 races. He could have won even more if it wasn't for reliability. I mean, there's not much to say about the season. I mean, he was practically flawless. Vettel or Webber didn't even stand a chance, so it's just a flawless year. This year doesn't really need to be talked about too much. It's just like domination at its finest, and can't help but think, wow, this guy is something magical. And for it being his second world championship, it was domination. They really had the car right this year, and he just made the car look magical. This is probably one of my favorite years to watch back, actually, as a Vettel fan. 2015 Ferrari, and it's not a championship winning year, but it is a year that I think Vettel really found himself within F1 more so than like he did with Red Bull. He was so passionate. He cared so much about making this Ferrari thing work. That win on his second debut with Ferrari in Malaysia was just spectacular. Hearing that radio, honestly, I'll play the radio.
Sebestian Vettel wins the Grand Prix of Malaysia.
Yes, yes, yes. Woo! Yes!
But just listen to that. Listen to that. It's just like magic to your ears hearing this guy just be so happy and care so much about a team winning. It's great. It really is great to see Vettel be in his element after the 2014 year that he had. I mean, he drove the rails off the car to a Mercedes that was still unstoppable at that time. He had wins. He made the car competitive and seemed to be killing anybody else that was even trying to be close. I mean, yet again, killed his teammate that year. So, you got to give it to him. He was even close to Nico Rosberg in a car that was definitely faster. So, 2015 Ferrari, second on my list. And finally, the one you were all probably expecting. And maybe you're not. Maybe you're expecting 2011. Maybe you're expecting 2015. Maybe you're expecting 2012. But in my opinion, the most unstoppable year of Vettel is 2013, and that is purely because he has the most unstoppable record there. It almost got beaten this year, but it comes to show you, if Verstappen couldn't beat it this year with a car that's definitely the fastest and miles ahead of everything else, kind of like his car was in 2013, but it takes a magical driver to make this happen. 9 wins in a row. He destroyed his teammate this year. Mark wasn't close. That tells you something. They're in the same machinery. He had 9 wins in a row. 9 wins in a row. 13 wins in the season. It's a record that got broken this year. Regardless, it's a record that used to be the highest of records, both in 13 wins and 9 wins in a row. It's crazy to think that he was doing this with this car. You have to give this the most unstoppable year and the best year. Now, do you guys know the 15 through 1 that I have rated? You guys tell me your list from 15 to 1. Tell me what you guys think, where you guys would rate, specifically like the 2022 and 2021 Aston Martin, because he's so far off the pace with these cars. Where would you rate these? Where would you rate the whole entire list? I would love to know. Honestly, I would love to know. It is sad to see this legend go, and he will be dearly missed. Dearly, dearly missed. And this is partially a video to commemorate him, but yeah, hopefully we see him racing again, maybe with Audi. Leave a like and subscribe. That would mean the world.